The way the story of Bereshis, of Genesis, unfolds, it is for the most part first Avraham, then Yitzchak, then Yaakov, then the Shvatim. But it's obviously not that simple. Why Yitzchak was born during Avraham's lifetime. In fact, Yaakov was born during Avraham. The Shvatim were born during Yitzchak's lifetime. And as a result, although the spirit of the Chumash is that you have a lesson of Avraham, a lesson of Yitzchak, a lesson of Yaakov, a lesson of Yossi, a lesson of Yehuda, and so on, specifically they get entangled. And I had two choices in how to approach this. One choice was to go according to the Avos. First to Avraham, then Yitzchak, then Yaakov. And I've pretty much done that. I didn't start Yitzchak till I finished Avraham. I didn't start Yaakov till I finished Yitzchak. And I was thinking to finish Yaakov before I do the Shvatim. But I changed my mind. I changed my mind because the story of Yaakov and the story of the Shvatim basically end at the same time. They both end as far as Vayechi. Yaakov is going to live till Vayechi. The end of the life of the Shvatim almost ends, as far as the Torah record is concerned, at the same time. And I sort of decided that we'll deal with the fact that we're dealing with Yaakov and the Shvatim, and they're very different. And we'll go according to the order of the chronology, the history, and the Chumash, rather than the personalities. So last week I told you that this week we would do Bikesh Yaakov Leisha V'Shalva. We're doing it next week, Mitzvah Hashem. Today we're going to talk about the story of Dina. Vateitzi Dina Bas Leah. Dina went out, and she was picked up by Shechem, and she was taken advantage of, and we all know the story. The Rebbe has a Sicha on this. This Sicha is about Dina. The Sicha is also about Leah. It's not a Sicha about Yaakov, in other words. And although Yaakov's life and Yaakov's lessons, as far as we're concerned, are not yet over, this is the decision that I made. I don't know if it's the correct decision or an incorrect decision. I just thought this is the way to go. And that's what we're going to do. So this Sikh is about Dina, the daughter of Leah, as opposed to Yaakov. We're going to be learning more about Yaakov next week. So we read, as we always do, the underlined. Okay? Vateiti Dina bas Leah. Dina, the daughter of Leah, went out. Asher Yodel Yaakov. Dina was the daughter of Leah from Yaakov. Lireis v'nei haaretz, for socializing purposes, to meet the girls of the land. Upirish Rashi explains, Bas Leah v'lei bas Yaakov. The Torah calls Dina the daughter of Leah, rather than call the daughter of Yaakov Avinu. Why? Why don't you say Dina bas Yaakov? El al Shem Yitzias. She's called the daughter of Leah not for biological and genetic reasons, but because of psychological and social reasons. She was like her mother. She'af he Ella al Shem Yitziyasa. It's about her tendency to go out into the streets. Nikras bas Leah. She'af he yatz on his house. She also was social and went out to meet people. And we find by Leah v'teitze Leah likras. Leah was going out to see the world, and Dina was going out to see the world. And the Torah is teaching us that Dina inherited these characteristics of going out into the world and being social, which caused her, as it turned out, incredible harm from her mother, not from her father Yaakov Avinu. Now, I am very good at suspense. I never keep it. Whenever I have an uncertainty, I right away fix it. So I will be non-suspenseful now as well. I'm going to tell you what's going to be the point. Yaakov is the father. Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah, the mothers. In Yaakov, the characteristics of all of these four women, Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah, are included in one person. In his wives, these four characters are four different people. And in the children, the development of these characters is far much more distinctive, far much more individual. In other words, Yaakov is a human being that has within himself all the personality types. Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah are people who have within themselves the basic personality types. In the 12 Shvatim, it's even more brought down. So, when you go from Yaakov to his wives, to his children, you're going from theoretical to potential to actual. In other words, Yaakov has a lot of contradictions within him. In his wives, the contradictions are less, and his children, the contradictions are completely redeemed and alleviated because they have very specific functions and definitions. And that's what the Sikh is going to talk to. That Dina's character comes from her mother, not from her father. Her father has a similar characteristic. But her father has many other characteristics as well. In Leah, and especially in Dina, the unique character of Dina becomes most forward, most emergent. And she does what she does. She goes out into the world and then she gets into trouble. So we read on. V'lachein nidali, it seems to me, shekavonas Rashi, when Rashi tells us, shabazeh Dina nikras kan bas Leah bashmeinu akasu. The Torah tells us Dina was Leah's daughter. The intent of the Torah telling us that Dina was Leah's daughter was the kishem sheposhad bepshutei shel mikra. We all understand. Sheitzias Leah hoisa davar. Leah is going out to greet Yaakov Avinu was considered a good thing. Kach hoisa yitzias Dina kishel atzma davar. Dina is going out of the camp. Lidas b'vnei sa'aretz was in itself a favorable thing. The questions that Rebbe has was, why would the Torah tell such a bad story? Dina goes out and she gets into trouble. Why would the Torah tell us a bad thing about anybody, let alone about Dina? And the answer is because her intentions were good. What she did was right. What happened was wrong, but what she did and why she did it was just. In order to explain to us what her intention was and why, from her perspective, her intentions, her actions were good, we call her Bas Leah. And we move on. And I want you to look at page 211, the right paragraph. What kind of person was Dina? She was a girl. What kind of a girl was she that allowed her, or that encouraged her, that compelled her to go out into the world? Says there are two things. Aleph. Ma'alasa shaladina ha'isakadel kolkach. Dina was incredibly holy, very, very pure, to such a degree. Achahaya b'kaycha, she had the potential possibility. Lahachazir lemutav as Esav Arasha. Dina could have made even the evil man Esav into a tzaddik. That was her power of persuasion. Beis. Hachzoras ish Rasha lemutav, bringing a Rasha like Esav back to good. Yesh bo ma'ila gadel kolkacha, such a powerful ma'ila. Shahaya kadai, it was worthwhile. Lahachnas as Dina, to put Dina into such a danger. Afilu al safek, even for an uncertainty. Shema tachzadel lemutav, perhaps you make him do children. So there's two things. Dina had the ability to makalav even a Rasha, and Dina was able to make the calculated decision to take the risk of going out to meet Esav, even if it's only a possibility to be able to bring him back. So the Rebbe says these were the character traits of Dina. So the Rebbe says, I'm skipping one paragraph now, I'm on page 211, the last paragraph on the right side. Ulefi pirish Rashi zeyesh leimar dezeh degam kavonas Rashi kan. The intention of Rashi here also is al that avar yitzias Dina, but Dina going out is lamal. When the Torah tells us Dina left home, went out into the streets, and we all know what happened later, not a good thing. The Torah is telling us that she went out because her going out was with a good intention. If Dina has such a powerful personality that she could make even Esav do tshuva, move when it's understood. When Dina goes out to meet the girls of Shechem, Dina's leaving her parents' home and going out to meet the other girls was not because she wanted to become like them and do things to the contrary of tznius. But to the contrary, to check out the girls, to make them behave, to bring them to a state of goodness. So the Rebbe says, we're comparing Dina to Leah. They were both yatzaniyas. They were social people. They went out of the little world into the greater world. Why is that important? Why say something negative about them? Says the Rebbe, it wasn't negative. It was positive. A negative thing came from it, but in and of itself it wasn't negative. And without much cost of Rashi, that's why Rashi says, Al Shem, Yitziyasa, because of her going out, Nikras Bas Leah, she's called the daughter of Leah. She also was someone who went out. This good character to go out and find Goyim and teach them about the Eibishter. Shahaya b'yacholta latzes, his ability to go out of the holy environment. Lides b'vnei sa'ares lachzid al-mutav, to bring people back to tshuva. Ba'ala me'ima, came to her from her mother. Sha'af hi atzanes gezu haya. Haisa, her mother was also the same kind of a person. So the first thing that Rebbe is trying to do was trying to spin that when Dina left her home to go out and meet the people, it was not a bad thing. Second of all, he says she gets this characteristic from Leah and not from Rachel. And the question is, where do you see this? From Leah, not from Yaakov. Where do you see this? So we turn to page 212 now when we keep on reading. The Rebbe is trying to, again, the way I see it is, the Rebbe is trying to explain to us, Yaakov is the patriarch. In Yaakov you have everything. Because in Yaakov you have everything, in Yaakov you really have nothing. A human being that has every mile, who has children, and those children have specific miles, you can't really attribute those specific miles to their parent, because their parent has many other miles. You can say they took from their parent this mile. But Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah are four separate women. Each one has certain milas that Yaakov Avinu has. So when you look at Dina and you see her life and her choices, you associate it with Leah, because in Leah you can see where Dina came from. In Yaakov you cannot see where Dina came from, because Yaakov essentially has every midah. And that's what the Rebbe explains. And here's what follows. Maila v'yachasam shall kol Yisrael Yaakov Avinu l'gav v'yachas l'Avraham v'Yitzchak. All of us, on page 212, where underlined, are descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And of course, we all associate with all three. Avraham is my father, Yitzchak is my father, Yaakov is my father. Sarah is my mother, Rivka is my mother, Leah and Rachel are my mothers, and Bilhah and Zilpah also my mothers, right? But, says the Rebbe, although we have three others, there is something special about our relationship with Yaakov Avinu. Of all of our patriarchs, the only patriarch whose children were also tzaddikim is Yaakov Avinu. Haremuven is therefore understood. Of all the three fathers, the one who's our father the most is Yaakov, because all of his children were tzaddikim. All the diversity that you can find in the Yidden later, Shosham he'avis, exist in the Avis. Kfi shehem beYaakov, as they are in Yaakov. Harei and beged the cloud, they're basic and general. V'achilukim shebi Yisrael, and the differences amongst Jews, that in this galu b'peil de b'nei Yaakov, which you can see in the different character traits, different personalities of Yaakov Avinu's children, Yud Beis Shvatim, shekeneged Yud Beis Haifan v'chiluki avei the Shesh Nabi Yisrael, correspond to the 12 tribes and the 12 different ways of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There you see developed all the potentials that Yaakov Avinu had. V'yesh leim, as I said, but let's add, when you look at the different shvatim, and you see each one had a different job, Reuven did serve Hashem in one way, Shimon served Hashem in another way, and Levi in a third way, and so on. So Gilui Mekedam Yankov, even though all of them come from Yaakov Avinu. So for example, Reuven's tendency to serve Hashem through vision, the Iyah, and Shimon's tendency to serve Hashem through hearing, Shmiya, and so on, all come from Yaakov. But Yaakov is one man that includes them all. Where do you see the individuation of the 12 Shvatim? Says the Rebbe, who be'emtzai say must have to do with the mothers. Rachalei, Bilhah, Zilpah, Shabanu es Beis Yisrael. You don't want to attribute yourself to Yaakov Avinu, because Yaakov Avinu is everything. You'd rather attribute yourself to Leah or to Rachel, because here individual mouths become separated. Now, what is the difference between Leah and Rachel? We talk about Leah being a yatzanis. She was a social person. And Dina learned this social tendency from her, and we see it as a positive thing. It's because Leah brings to fruition one character trait of Yitzchak, of Yaakov, and Rachel brings a character trait, a different character trait of Yaakov. And the question is what they are. So the Rebbe says, there's 12 ways to serve Hashem, because there's 12 Shvatim. Shem Yud Beis Drachim V'Fanav Beis Hashem, there's 12 different ways. Says the Rebbe, nevertheless, though there are 12 paths to God, there's basically 2 paths to God. And they are tzaddikim and bal tshuva. You could serve Hashem as a tzaddik, and you could serve Hashem as a bal tshuva. What's the difference? So I'm reading on. Tzaddikim involved only in holiness, in Torah and in mitzvahs, and so on. Ve'ilu avodas tshuva, while the job of tshuva Moira shows al havoida on the surface, to transform evil into good. In other words, lahalas is a chayla raise of what is ordinary to what is holy. So tzaddikim are involved in theoretical holy stuff. Balei tshuva are involved in the real world. So that everyone wants to say you have in Yaakov both a tzaddik and a bal tshuva. It later shows itself in Rachel. She represents the tzaddik, and Leah represents the bal tshuva, and even more so when they're children. Says the Rebbe, the difference between Leah's children and Rachel's children is a statement of who they were, and this is the difference. Page 213 now, girls. The basic difference between the various tribes. Why we said the Leah's children are primarily the idea of tshuva. Ubinyamin Avedas Tzadikim, Yossi ben Yamin are involved in Tzadikim, is because Sharshei B'Ha'imois has to do with the mothers. The Leah Shayachas Lavedas Hatval Tshuva, Leah has a special connection to Tshuva. The Rachel Lavedas Tzadikim, Rachel has a connection to Tzadik. So the Rebbe says, Dina was a Yatzanis because she was the daughter of a woman who represents Tshuva. Tshuva means you have a connection to the world, and you go out into the world and you try to change it. That's why Dina was a Yatzanis. And the Rebbe explains. It's something she would go out. She would go out into the world to meet people, as opposed to sitting in her house. From the word Yitzia, right, to go out. Where do we see it? So I'll skip a little bit. Rachel was beautiful and Leah wasn't beautiful. Rachel was so happy and Leah was crying. So the Rebbe says, Rashi tells us that Rachel's happiness was because she knew she was going to marry Yankov. Leah's sadness because she was afraid she would end up marrying Esav. But the Rebbe says there's also the spiritual component. Rachel was happy because Tzadikim are happy. Leah was crying because her idea is tshuva. And her children inherited this character trait from her. Page 214 now. That's what Rashi tells us. Al Shem Yitziyasa Nekras Bas Leah. The Torah calls the daughter of Leah because she, like her mother, had a tendency to go out. Sha'af hi atanis Eish also would go out. Shenem, as the pasuk says. Vateitzi Leah lekrasa. Ivan lefi shetchuna zu shal Dina. Dina had a character trait. Lifel b'chutz, to affect her environment. Ba la b'Yerusha min Leah, she inherited from Leah. Le'yisa bas Leah, since Dina was the daughter of Leah. Sheteichen avedasa hi, the content of her work was lechutz on the outside. Lapech esara shebechutz l'teif, to transform the evil which is on the outside into good. Ella, it is only shekafish inyan zel b'mekede, when you look at Dina as she's in Leah and how she is in Yankov Avinu, you can't see it so much. Leah was afraid to fall into Esav's hands because she didn't feel like she had enough of that strength to go out into the world. But in her children, then this service of Hashem revealed itself fully. The idea of making a Balchul. Yankov Avinu includes everything. Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah include a fourth. The 12 Shvatim include a 12th. If Yankov includes everything, he includes the idea of tshuva. If Leah represents the tshuva aspect within Yankov, she represents tshuva. But Leah doesn't want to go out to the world herself. Why not? Because the way the tshuva is in her, she's still too close to the unity of Yankov Avinu. But Dina, Leah's daughter, she's the third generation. In her, the idea that you should be a girl and go out into the world and change it, rather than the changing of the world affect you, was stronger than it was in Leah and stronger than it was in Yankov. So the fact that Dina goes out and not Leah and not Yankov is all positive. Leah was a girl whose personality and life were designed from the outside that she should go out into the world and change it. And the Rebbe continued. Dina has a certain kind of personality. Her personality is to go out into the world and change it. She follows her personality, she goes out into the world, and something very, very bad happens. The Torah tells us the story about Dina's going out into the world because the Torah feels that we need to hear this story. What is the message of the Torah? The message of the Torah is that a person who is given the special koiches that Dina has to go out into the world. There's a risk factor involved, and chas v'shalom, we should never fall into the kind of mistakes b'chlal and the mistake that Dina made, especially. But the Torah is telling us the story to teach us what Dina represents as far as we are concerned. Look at Sivvav. Okay, all of us know what the pasuk says, that the nature of a woman is to be private. The foundation of the home, in other words, they don't go out into the world. The primary function is living as Beis Yisrael, to build the Jewish nation. Women are busy with the kids, so they're stuck in the house, so to speak. Nevertheless, those women that were gifted with special character traits, that can influence other people. The lesson of Dina is that if you could go out into the world and make a difference, you have to use this talent. Of course, and it's take away for the sake of heaven. To bring hearts closer. To serve the Eibishter. To bring back those daughters that are outside to a state that is positive. So the message is Azoi. The story of Dina is told in the Chumash. You read the story and think, okay, I'm not going to let my daughters leave my house. Says the Rebbe, no. If the whole point was that Leah should not have left home, the Torah wouldn't tell us Dina should not have left home. The Torah doesn't tell us the story. The Torah tells the story to tell us that in spite of what happened to Dina, this is correct. Ubefrat, particularly, Shemuvun Apashat, especially understood, Sheishtadlos, do this effort. Tzrich Aliyas, but Kiyos Labas Yisrael, but if it has to be tzniistic. Top of page 215. Even when she goes out into the world, you can see because she's tzniistic and so forth and so on. But at the same time, she does what she needs to do. To the contrary, the nature of being a kadaf that women have, Misayeh helps them. To succeed, to bring people's hearts closer to serving Hashem, more than men. As we see in actual fact, you have people who try very hard to do kiruv, and they don't do so well. You have people who don't try hard to do kiruv, they just want to be nice to people, and then they being makar of more people. That means that a woman's softness and kindness can result in being much more successful in kiruv. When you try to bring someone closer to Yiddishkeit, but through pleasant and peace methods, you have much more success by working in debates and in arguments and so forth and so on. So the Rebbe says the entire story of Dina is in the Chumash, not to tell us something negative about Dina. To the contrary, the story of Dina tells us that even though something bad happened to Dina, you need to know the story because Dina was right in her decision to go out into the world. Why? What happened to her is that the Rebbe doesn't go into it in the Sichos. There's other Sichos perhaps where the Rebbe explains it. But what's more important is the understanding that just like Dina went out, a woman who has those qualities has to go out, as long as her kavanah is l'shem shamayim. So what do I hear in this Sicha? The obvious message of this Sicha is that a story in the Chumash, which is one of the most tragic pieces in Bereshis, right? It's a very uncomfortable story. It's a very uncomfortable story, Dina and Shechem. And when you read it, you can't help but assume that Dina was a troublemaker. She was a rebellious teen, So this is not at all. The Torah wouldn't record it. The Torah tells it to us because we're supposed to imitate Dina. Now again, the Rebbe does not at all address why what happened to Dina happened to Dina. But he does address the idea of going out into the world. Now how do I read this and how do I hear this? I'll tell you how I read this and I hear this. I can't tell you if this is 100% true, but this is my sense. The Chumash is a lesson. And it's a lesson that's communicated to us through a journey. Abraham's journey, Yitzchak's journey, Yaakov's journey, and his children's journey. Abraham had a great influence on the world. Yitzchak had a great influence on the world. Yaakov had a great influence on the world. Dina is going out into the world to try and influence the world around herself as well. What I hear is that Yaakov did what he did. He went out into the world and he went through all the things he went through to create the Jewish nation for his children. Dina is already the next generation. Dina goes out into the world not only to create another generation of Jews, Dina goes out into the world to educate the whole world. In other words, Yaakov's going out of the realm of holiness was for the sake of his family. Dina's going out of the realm of holiness was for the sake of the whole world. So I understand Dina, and I suppose this is how we're going to understand the Shvatim in our later pashas, in our later discussions, as being another step. You're not going out into the world only for what you could take from the world into your realms. You're going out into the world in order to be able to take from what's in your realm and bring it into the world. And perhaps that's how you understand the difference between Dina and Leah, and certainly between Dina and Yaakov. Dina is going out into the world to meet non-Jewish girls to affect them. Not to take from them what she can take for herself, but to affect them. And perhaps this is the real story. The real story is that Dina is the next generation. She's doing the next avodah, as the Shvatim will do as the Pashas unfold.